Here is part 1, written according to your specifications. Asterisk, 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 the city outside the practice room window was just a blur of gray buildings and moving cars. Inside, the only things that were real were the piano, the girl, and the music. The girl was 8 years old. Her name was Ilara, a name her mother had chosen because it sounded like a song. But in this room, for the last 3 hours, she wasn't Ilara. She was a set of ears, eyes, and 10 small. Strong fingers locked in a battle with a storm of notes on the page. The piece was called Raskowski's Etude in F major. To anyone else, the sheet music looked like a frantic swarm of black ants scattered across the lines. To her teacher, a woman everyone called Maestra Petrova, it was a mountain to be climbed. To Ilara, it was a puzzle box. A beautiful, complicated, tricky puzzle box made of sound. Her job was to find the key, open it up, and let the music inside fly out perfectly. Maestra Petrova sat in her usual chair, a straight-backed throne of worn velvet. She didn't smile much, but her eyes missed nothing. They watched Ilara's hands, her posture, the tiny flicker of her eyebrows when she hit a wrong note. Again, the maestra said, her voice like gravel. From the top of the second page, the arpeggios are not water. They are little knives, sharp, precise. Each one must cut the air cleanly. Ilara nodded. She didn't speak. She took a breath that filled her small lungs, placed her fingers on the cool ivory, and dove back in. The music started fast and stayed fast. It was a waterfall of sound, her right hand dancing up and down, while her left hand punched out strong, clear chords. The room filled with it. For a minute, it was perfect. She could feel it, the momentum, the sparkle the maestra was always talking about. Then, on a tricky jump from one chord to another, the pinky finger of her left hand slipped. It grazed 2 keys at once, making an ugly, clashing sound that ripped through the melody like a tear in silk. She stopped. Her shoulders slumped. "Why did you stop?" Maestra Petrova asked, though she knew exactly why. "The wrong note," Ilara whispered, staring at the guilty finger. And the world did not end. If you make a wrong note in the competition, you do not stop. You swallow it, you hide it, you keep going. The judges will forgive one wrong note. They will never forgive a stop. The teacher leaned forward. "You think the great pianists never make mistakes? They make them all the time. But they are magicians. They make you not see, not hear. That is the real skill." Ilara knew about the competition. The golden keys. It was all anyone talked about. Her mother had bought her a new dress for it, stiff and white with a lace collar that itched her neck. Her father had promised her a special trip to the Science Museum if she did well. The word "if" hung in the air, heavy and quiet. The judges, Maestra Petrova continued, they are not there to enjoy the music. They are there to find the flaws. Like doctors looking for sickness. The head judge, Dr. Reinhardt. She said the name like it was a cold draft from under a door. He has ears like a bat. He hears everything. For him, passion is not as important as perfection. You must give him perfection. This confused Ilara. At home, when she played, her father would close his eyes and smile. Her mother would hum along while cooking. It was about the feeling, the story the music told. Here, with the maestro, it was about angles and pressure and milliseconds. It was about winning. The lesson ended. Maestra Petrova gave a rare, thin smile and patted Ilara's head. "You are close. So close. One more week of this, and you will be ready. You have a gift, little one. Do not drop it." Ilara packed her music bag slowly. The gift. People were always talking about her gift. Sometimes it didn't feel like a gift. It felt like a very small, very heavy suitcase she had to carry everywhere. And everyone was always watching to see if she would drop it. Her mother was waiting in the car. "How was it, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice full of warm hope. "Good," Elara said, which is what she always said. "The maestra thinks you're ready?" "She says I'm close." Her mother beamed, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "I knew it. My brilliant girl." At home, after dinner, Elara didn't go to the TV or her toys. She went to the old upright piano in the living room. It was nothing like the majestic grand piano at the maestra's studio. This one was scuffed, and a few of the keys made a soft thump instead of a clear note. But this was her piano. This was where she played for fun. She didn't open the Moscow ski. Instead, she played from memory. A simple, sad little melody by a composer named Botched. It was slow and thoughtful, like walking through an empty house. She played it differently each time, sometimes loud, sometimes soft, lingering on a note that felt sad, speeding up on a part that felt like a question. This was her music. No one was judging it. It was just hers. Her father came in, drying a plate with a towel. He leaned against the doorframe and listened until she finished. "That was nice," he said. "Different from the firework one you've been practicing." "That one has to be perfect," Elara said, not looking up from the keys. "And this one?" he asked. "This one just has to be." He nodded, as if she'd said something very wise. "You know, the most important person to play for is yourself. Don't forget that in all the fuss." But Elara was already thinking ahead. In 1 week, she would be on a real stage, under bright, hot lights. She would see the judges sitting at a long table in the dark. She imagined Dr. Reinhardt, a man with a stern face and those bat-like ears, listening for every slip. The thought made her stomach feel tight. For the next 7 days, her life was a loop. School, then practice. Eat, then practice. Sleep and dream of practicing. The fast sections of the Moscow ski got faster. The loud parts got louder. She could play it in her sleep. Her fingers knew the path so well, they could almost find their way without her. The night before the competition, she lay in bed. She stretched her fingers against the moonlight coming through her window. She ran through the piece in her head, from the first bold chord to the final, triumphant run. She didn't make a single mistake in her imagination. It was flawless. It was perfect. She fell asleep believing that tomorrow, if she could just hold on to that perfect feeling in her head, if she could just ignore the itchy lace and the bright lights and the silent judges, she could open that puzzle box on stage and set the music free, just the way the maestro wanted. Just the way Dr. Reinhardt demanded that, she was ready to give them perfection. The day of the Golden Keys competition arrived with a sky the color of pale milk. The girl's mother helped her into the stiff white dress, her fingers fumbling with the small buttons at the back. The lace collar scratched at her neck, a constant, annoying reminder of what was to come. She didn't speak much at breakfast, just pushed her toast around the plate while her parents talked in the cheerful, overly bright voices adults use when they're nervous for you. The concert hall was huge, a palace of dark wood and red velvet. It smelled of old books and lemon polish. Backstage was a different world, a chaotic jumble of whispers, the squeak of shoes on linoleum, and the sound of other children warming up on electric keyboards with headphones on. Their faces were tight with concentration. The girl found a quiet corner and sat on a folding chair, her music bag clutched to her chest like a shield. She could hear the muffled sounds of other performers coming from the stage. A clear, tinkling sonatina. A dramatic piece with lots of loud chords. Each one ended, and a polite scatter of applause would seep through the heavy curtain. With every clap, her stomach twisted itself into a tighter knot. Maestra Petrova found her there. The teacher knelt down, her usually severe face softened with something like concern. "Remember," she said, her voice low, It is just a room. The piano is just a piano. Play it like you own it. Do not look at them. Look at your hands, or look at the music, or look at a spot on the back wall. Ignore everything else. The girl nodded, her throat too dry to form words. And if something goes wrong, the maestra added, her grip firm on the girl's shoulder, you keep going. You swim through it. You do not stop. A lady with a clipboard and a headset called a name. It wasn't hers yet. She watched another girl, a little older, walk towards the curtain. She looked pale but determined. The girl closed her eyes and tried to run the Moscow ski in her head. But the notes, which usually flowed in perfect order, felt jumbled. The starting chord escaped her. A cold panic began to creep up from her toes. Then she heard her own name. It sounded strange, like it belonged to someone else. Her mother gave her a quick, hard hug. You can do it, sweetheart. Just play it like you do at home. Her father winked, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. She walked through the heavy blue curtain. The stage lights were like walking into the sun. They were hot and blinding, turning the vast auditorium into a black hole. She could just make out the shapes of people, a sea of dark blurs, and the long, ominous table at the front where the judges sat. Her shoes, her nice patent leather shoes, clicked too loudly on the wooden floor as she walked to the magnificent grand piano. It was a beast of polished black, gleaming under the lights, so much bigger than the one at her teacher's. She arranged the crisp sheet music on the stand, though she didn't need it. She adjusted the stool, her feet dangling, not touching the floor. The silence in the hall was absolute and heavy. It pressed down her ears. She could hear her own heart, a fast drumbeat in her chest. She placed her hands in her lap, took a deep breath as Maestra Petrova had taught her, and then lifted them to the keys. The first chord rang out, strong and confident. It echoed in the silent hall. Good. So far, good. She launched into the running passages, her right hand flying. The notes were a sparkling stream, just like in practice. For a few bars, she was inside the music. She was doing it. Then, from the black hole of the audience, a cough. It was a dry, raspy sound. It didn't belong. It broke the spell. Her mind, which had been flowing with the music, suddenly snapped back to her body. She was on a stage. Hundreds of people were watching. Dr. Reinhardt was down there, listening. The thought was like a crack in glass. Her focus splintered. Her fingers kept moving, but they were on their own now, operating on memory alone, while her mind watched from a terrified distance. She approached the difficult jump, the one her left-hand pinky had slipped on last week. Don't slip, don't slip, don't slip, her mind chanted. Her pinky didn't slip. It froze. It hesitated for a fraction of a second, searching for the key. That tiny hesitation was a disaster. It threw her whole rhythm off. The right hand was a train rushing ahead. The left hand was stumbling on the platform. They were no longer together. A wrong note clanged out, harsh and ugly. Heat rushed to her face. Keep going, she heard the maestra's voice in her head. Swim through it. She tried. She desperately tried to pull the piece back together. But the panic was a flood now, washing away all the careful pathways in her brain. Her hands, her clever, trained hands, betrayed her. They fumbled. They pressed two keys at once. They scrambled for the next phrase and missed entirely. The beautiful waterfall of sound became a car crash of noise. The melody was gone, buried under clashing chords and stumbling scales. She stopped playing. Just stopped. Her hands fell from the keys into her lap as if they were burned. The silence that followed was worse than any wrong note. It was a living thing, thick and smothering. It was the sound of hundreds of people holding their breath, feeling sorry for her, waiting for her to run away crying. The heat of the lights felt like a punishment. She couldn't move. She couldn't even look up slowly, forcing herself. She raised her eyes from her lap. In the front row, she could see the judge's table clearly now. A woman had her hand over her mouth. A man was looking down at his papers, uncomfortable. And in the center sat Dr. Reinhardt. He had taken off his glasses and was cleaning them slowly with a cloth, not looking at her. Then he put them back on, peered over them at her, and then looked down at his score, making a small, sharp mark with his pencil. The sound of that pencil on paper was the loudest sound in the world. Her vision blurred. She scanned the front row for her parents. She saw her mother's face, pale and stricken, her father's arm around her shoulders. Her mother's eyes were wide with shock, and a heartbreak so raw it made the girl want to disappear. She saw Maestra Petrova standing in the wings just off stage. The teacher's face was a mask of stone, but her eyes were closed, as if she couldn't bear to watch. This was it. This was the failure they had all warned her about. This was the moment she had dropped the gift. The heavy suitcase was wide open, and everything had spilled out, broken, for everyone to see. The shame was a physical pain, a hot ache in her chest and throat. Every second of the silence was an eternity of being the smallest, most foolish person in the world. The expectation was clear. She should get up. She should give a little bow to the pitying applause that would come, and she should scamper off the stage, back into the darkness where she belonged. Dr. Reinhardt was clearly waiting for her to do just that, to clear the stage for the next. Proper pianist. Tears threatened, hot and insistent. But something else stirred underneath the shame and panic. A stubborn little knot of anger. Not at the judges or the piano, or even at herself. It was anger at the music. This beautiful, difficult, tricky puzzle box had beaten her. It had laughed at her and tripped her up in front of everyone. And as she sat there, drowning in the silence, staring at the black and white keys that had just betrayed her, she wasn't seeing a path to escape. She was seeing the puzzle itself, broken into pieces on the floor. And a wild, clear, simple thought cut through the fog of her fear. Asterisk, if I can't play it their way. What's the real heart of it? Asterisk, she didn't know where the thought came from. But it was there, sharp and clear. She kept staring at the keyboard, her breathing slowing just a little. The audience, the lights, the judges, they all faded into a distant buzz. There was only the geography of the piano, the map of the piece still printed in her mind, and this new, reckless idea. The silence wasn't quiet. It roared in her ears, a high-pitched, screaming kind of quiet that was louder than the music had been. She could feel every single pair of eyes on her skin, like tiny pinpricks of heat. Her cheeks were on fire. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. Part of her, a big part, wanted to slide off the stool, melt into a puddle on the shiny floor, and let someone mop her away. She could see the path of escape clearly. Just a few steps to the left, into the dark wings where her teacher stood. That darkness felt like the only safe place in the world. But her legs felt like they were made of stone. They wouldn't move. The head judge, the man with the glasses, shifted in his seat. He cleared his throat. It was a dry, official sound. It was the sound of someone about to speak, to say, "Thank you, that will be all," and release her from this torture. That sound was the trigger. Something inside her switched. It wasn't courage, not really. It was something more basic, like the stubborn refusal of an animal that is cornered. She had not come here just to run away. She had come to play. And even though the piece was broken, the piano was still there. The keys were still there. She was still there. Her blurry vision focused on the keyboard. It wasn't a scary monster anymore. It was just a tool. 88 black and white keys, arranged in a pattern she knew better than the alphabet. She stared at them, and a strange calm began to settle over the panic. It was the same feeling she got when a math problem was too complicated, and she had to close her eyes and think of the simplest, most basic rule. She stopped hearing the rustling from the audience. She stopped seeing the disappointed faces. In her mind, she wiped everything clean. She let go of the memory of the last 2 minutes, the horrible clashing sounds, the stumble. She went back to the very beginning, to the first time she had seen the sheet music for the Moscow Ski. She remembered how it looked like a city skyline, full of tall peaks and deep valleys. She remembered how her teacher had explained its structure. It is not just a bunch of fast notes, Maestra Petrova had said, tapping the page. See here? This is the home, the key of F major. And here, it takes a little journey to a new neighborhood, to C major. It visits, it has adventures, but it always comes back home. That was it. The piece wasn't about every single note. It was about the journey. It was about the story it told from one chord to the next dot in the total stillness of her mind. She didn't see the thousands of individual notes she had practiced. She saw shapes. She saw blocks of sound. She saw the handful of important chords that were the pillars holding the whole piece up. The fast runs between them were just decoration, like glitter thrown on a Christmas tree. The tree itself was the important part, the piece that had taken her over 4 minutes to play properly, and had just taken her 2 minutes to fall apart, suddenly shrank. It collapsed in on itself. In her head, it was no longer a long, winding road. It was a map. A simple map with only a few landmarks. She thought of her father's old camera. He had shown her how you could take a long, complicated video of a car driving down a street, and then you could speed it up until the whole trip took 3 seconds. You lost the details, the color of a front door, a cat on a wall, but you saw the whole journey in one blink. You saw the point of it. That was what she wanted to do. Not play the piece. Show the piece. Show its skeleton. Show its heart. It was a crazy idea. It was probably the craziest idea she had ever had. Judges wanted perfection, not. Whatever this was, they wanted you to color perfectly inside the lines. She was thinking about tearing the coloring book page out, crumpling it into a ball, and saying, "Look, this is the shape of the elephant." But the thought wouldn't leave. It buzzed in her head, clean and clear and electric. It was the only thought that pushed out the shame. She had already failed. What more could they do? They couldn't fail her twice. This wasn't for them anymore. This was for her. This was her answer to the piano that had tripped her up. A short, simple answer. Her breathing, which had been shallow and quick, slowed down. Her shoulders, which were hunched up around her ears, relaxed. She stopped looking at the judges. She stopped looking at her parents. She looked only at the keys, seeing not ivory and ebony, but a landscape. A landscape she was about to fly over in a single leap. She lifted her hands from her lap. They weren't trembling anymore. They felt steady. They felt sure. She placed them on the piano, but not in the starting position for the Moscow Ski. She spread her left hand wide, her small fingers stretching to cover a big, solid F major chord at the very bottom of the keyboard. Her right hand hovered, ready near the top dot. This was it. There was no sheet music for this. No teacher had taught her this. This was hers. From the judge's table, Dr. Reinhardt saw the girl move. He had been about to speak, to kindly end this painful spectacle. He saw her shoulders settle. He saw her lift her head just a fraction. And most curiously, he saw her place her hands on the piano in a way that had nothing to do with the piece she was supposed to be playing. It wasn't a position of defeat. It was a position of intention. He closed his mouth. He leaned forward, his elbows on the table, the pencil in his hand, poised to write a final score. went still. The girl's mother, in the front row, saw the change too. She gripped her husband's hand harder. "What is she doing?" she whispered, her voice tight with a new kind of fear. Not fear of failure, but fear of the unknown. The girl wasn't crying. She wasn't running. She looked like she was about to start again, but her face was different. It was focused in a way they hadn't seen before. Maestra Petrova, in the wings, opened her eyes. She saw her student's posture, the set of her small back. A frown creased her forehead. This wasn't in the plan. There was no recovery from a train wreck like that. The only thing to do was leave with a little dignity. Yet the girl wasn't leaving. She was preparing. But for what? The girl took one last deep breath. The huge, silent hall waited. In that moment, she wasn't thinking about competitions or judges or gifts. She was thinking about the map in her head. She was thinking about going from home, on the journey, and back home again. And she was going to do it fast. Her fingers pressed down. Her left hand struck first. It wasn't a gentle press. It was a declaration. A deep, resonant, booming F major chord exploded from the belly of the grand piano. The sound was so rich and full, it vibrated in the wood of the stage and hummed in the teeth of the people in the front row. It wasn't just a note. It was home. It was the foundation, the root of everything that was supposed to come. Before that sound could even begin to fade, her right hand became a blur. It flew from the high treble keys down towards the middle of the keyboard in a lightning-fast, shimmering slide glissando. But this wasn't a random, showy sweep of noise. As her right hand shot down, her fingers were spread just so, catching the most important notes of the scale, the ones that outlined the journey from home to the next big idea. It was like a beam of light, tracing the path of the melody in one brilliant streak. Then, both hands met in the middle. Not for a messy crash, but for a sharp, brilliant C major chord, the new neighborhood her teacher had talked about. It rang out, clear as a bell, a perfect contrast to the deep opening. It lasted for less than a heartbeat. Now her hands became a mirror of each other, a symmetrical dance. They flew outwards from that central chord, left hand racing down, right hand racing up in two more blazing, precise glissandos, outlining the shape of the fastest, most difficult run in the whole piece. They didn't play every one of the 70 notes in that run. They played its shadow. They played its outline against the wall. You could hear the shape of it, the swoop and the dive, without hearing the detail. Her left hand landed on another powerful chord, a twist in the journey that added a touch of drama, of question. Her right hand answered immediately with a flickering, dancing pattern that lasted a millisecond, capturing all the playful energy of the middle section. Back and forth, up and down the keyboard, her hands flew. They were no longer separate. They were one creature, one mind, moving with a speed that made the audience blink. It wasn't messy. That was the shocking thing. In all that incredible speed, every sound was intentional. Every chord was perfectly clear. Every sweeping slide had a direction and a purpose. She was building the skeleton of the music in mid-air. She was connecting the dots, and the picture that emerged wasn't the detailed portrait she was supposed to paint. It was an X-ray, and an X-ray shows you what's underneath, what's real, what holds everything together, that the journey rushed on, compressed into seconds. You could feel the building tension, the moments of lightness, the stormy passages, all whistling past like landscapes seen from a speeding train. And then, the final turn home. Her hands flew from the far ends of the keyboard, converging once more. They slammed down together on a magnificent, crashing, triumphant F major chord, the same home she had started with, but transformed by the adventure. It was a chord that said, "And we're back." The sound filled the hall. A glorious ringing wave of harmony. And then silence. Total, utter silence. Her hands lifted from the keys and settled back into her lap. The whole thing, from the first booming chord to the final ringing resolution, had taken 3 seconds. Maybe 4. It was over almost before it had begun. For a long moment, nothing happened. The audience was frozen. Their brains were lagging, trying to process what they had just witnessed. They had come to hear a child play a difficult piece. They had heard that child fall apart. And then, instead of tears, they had been given. That, what was it? It wasn't the piece. It couldn't be called the piece. But it held the ghost of the piece, its DNA, its soul, packed into a single, breathtaking flash. The head judge, Dr. Reinhardt, hadn't moved a muscle. He was still leaning forward, his elbows on the table, his glasses perched on the end of his nose. His eyes were wide. He was not looking at the girl. He was staring at the space above the piano, as if he could still see the trails of sound hanging in the air. The pencil had fallen from his fingers and rolled onto his score sheet. He didn't notice. His mind, a mind that had spent 50 years cataloging correct notes and proper technique, was racing. He had just seen something that broke all the rules. He had not heard a performance. He had heard an idea. A stroke of genius born from the ashes of total failure. It was arrogant. It was brilliant. It was utterly incomprehensible. And yet, in some deep part of him that loved music more than rules, he felt he had understood it perfectly. The girl's mother had her hand pressed tightly over her mouth again, but the look in her eyes was completely different. It wasn't shock or heartbreak anymore. It was confusion, awe, and a dawning, unbelievable pride. She looked at her husband. He was shaking his head slowly, a huge, bewildered smile spreading across his face. He hadn't understood the music, not the way the judges did, but he understood his daughter. He had seen that stubborn set of her jaw before, usually when she was trying to fit a puzzle piece in the wrong spot. He had just seen her solve a puzzle in a way no one ever thought to try. Backstage, Maestra Petrova stood absolutely still. One hand was clasped over her chest. Her face was pale. For a teacher who valued control and precision above all, what she had just seen was an earthquake. It was chaos, but it was a controlled, intelligent, fearless chaos. The girl had not salvaged the performance. She had reinvented it. She had taken the broken pieces and built a tiny, perfect, stunning sculpture from the rubble. The maestra felt a dizzying mix of horror and the most profound respect she had ever felt for a student. The child had just taught the teacher a lesson. On stage, the girl finally looked up. The intense focus was gone from her face, replaced by a kind of quiet surprise, as if she herself couldn't quite believe what she had just done. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't crying. She was just there. She slid off the piano bench. The sound of her shoes on the floor was tiny in the immense quiet. She turned towards the black hole of the audience, gave a small, quick bow from the waist, just as she had been taught. It wasn't a bow that asked for applause. It was a bow that said, "I am finished." Then, without a glance at the judges, she walked steadily across the stage, her white dress bright under the lights, and disappeared into the darkness of the wings. The girl walked through the heavy blue curtain, and the moment she was backstage, the world rushed back in. It wasn't the quiet, nervous world from before. It was a buzzing hive of wide eyes and hushed, urgent whispers. The other children, waiting for their turns, looked at her as if she were a creature from another planet. Some looked confused. A few of the older ones looked almost annoyed, as if she had broken some sacred rule. One little boy just stared, his mouth hanging open. She didn't look at any of them. She walked straight past the staring faces, her eyes fixed on a spot on the floor. She felt empty, like a glass that had been poured out. All the fear, the shame, the wild electric focus, it was all gone. Now there was just a strange, hollow quiet inside her. She found the corner where her music bag was and sat down on the floor beside it, her back against the cool wall. A few seconds later, her parents found her. Her mother rushed over and knelt down, pulling her into a tight hug. "Oh, sweetheart," she murmured into her hair, her voice thick with a million emotions. "Oh, my brave, brave girl." Her father knelt too, putting a big hand on her shoulder. What was that, kiddo?" he asked, his voice full of gentle wonder. "At the end there?" The girl just shrugged, her face buried in her mother's shoulder. She didn't have words for it. It had just happened. Trying to explain it would be like trying to catch smoke. Before she could even try, a shadow fell over them. It was Maestra Petrova. The teacher's face was unreadable. She looked at the girl, then at the parents. "Come," she said, her voice low. "We should not stay here." They gathered their things and followed the maestra out a side door into a long, quiet corridor lined with portraits of old composers. The sounds of the next competitor's careful sonatina faded behind them. The maestra stopped and turned to face them. For a long moment, she just looked at the girl. "I do not know," the teacher began slowly, "whether to scold you or applaud you." She shook her head. "What you did, it was not the assignment. It was not the Moskowski. Technically, it was a demolition." The girl's mother held her tighter. Her father's jaw set. "But," the maestra continued, and she let out a long breath. "It was also the most profound musical insight I have ever witnessed from someone your age. You did not play the notes. You played the architecture." She looked at the parents. She took the blueprint of the music and showed it to us. "In 3 seconds. I have taught for 30 years. I have never seen anything like it." The girl finally looked up. She saw that her teacher's eyes were not angry. They were bright, intense, almost startled. "Was it okay?" the girl whispered, her voice small in the hallway. The maestra gave a short, sharp laugh. "Okay? No, it was not okay. It was not correct. It was not proper." She leaned down slightly. "But it was true. And in art, sometimes truth is more important than being correct. Remember that. But," she added, straightening up, "do not ever do it again in a competition. You will not win." Just then, a door at the far end of the corridor opened. The lady with the clipboard emerged, followed by Dr. Reinhardt, the head judge. He was holding his score sheets. His face was serious, but not unkind. He walked directly towards their little group. The parents stiffened. The maestra stood a little taller. The girl felt a fresh flutter of nerves in her stomach. This was it. This was where he would tell her how inappropriate it was, how she had disrespected the music and the competition. Dr. Reinhardt stopped in front of them. He nodded politely to the parents and the teacher. Then he looked down at the girl. He studied her for a moment, his sharp eyes missing nothing. "Your performance," he said, his voice dry and precise, "was, by the standards of this competition, a failure. The initial piece was incomplete and marred by significant error. The words hung in the air, factual and heavy." The girl looked at her shoes. "However," he said, and he paused, choosing his words with care. "What followed was not a performance. It was a statement." He adjusted his glasses. "I have spent my life listening for perfection. Today I heard something else. I heard understanding. You did not play the song. You played the idea of the song." He looked at Maestra Petrova. "You teach your technique," he said, his tone becoming almost stern. "You drill the scales, the arpeggios, the dynamics. You must. She needs that discipline." Then he looked back at the girl, and his stern expression softened, just a tiny bit. But you must also protect that. He pointed a finger gently at her own forehead. That mind, that way of seeing. Do not let anyone, not even a demanding old teacher, crush that instinct. It is far more rare than perfect pitch. He gave a small, formal nod. Thank you for a most memorable afternoon. Then he turned and walked back down the corridor, his footsteps echoing that no one spoke for a minute. The girl's mother was crying quietly, tears of relief and pride streaming down her face. Her father kept squeezing her shoulder. The maestra let out another long breath. Well, she said, you heard him. A failure and a revelation, both at once. She looked at the girl. This is a complicated day. You will not get a trophy today. But you got something perhaps more valuable. You got the attention of a master. And you learned something about yourself. They drove home as the afternoon sun turned golden. The girl sat in the back seat, the itchy lace dress finally swapped for soft cotton pants and a t-shirt. She stared out the window, watching the city blur past. You know, her father said, glancing at her in the rearview mirror, I think I liked your version better. It was shorter, for one thing. He grinned. The girl managed a small smile dotted home. She didn't go to the living room piano. She went to her room and took out her box of Lego. She started building a tall, twisty tower, not following any instructions, just putting pieces together the way she felt they should go. Later, after dinner, she wandered into the living room. The old upright piano sat silently in the corner. She walked over and lifted the cover. She played a single note, middle C. It rang out, warm and familiar. She didn't play the Moskowski. She didn't play anything fast or showy. She played a simple, slow melody with her right hand, making it up as she went along. It was a melody about a quiet evening, about the feeling of her cat curled on the sofa, about the weird and wonderful day that was finally over. Her father came in and listened, leaning against the doorframe, just like always. When she finished, he didn't say it was nice. He didn't say it was brilliant. He just said, That's a new one. Yeah, the girl said. It is, she understood, in a fuzzy way she wouldn't be able to explain for years what had happened. There was the music you played for others, the notes on the page, the rules, the perfection everyone wanted. And then there was the music you played for yourself, the truth of it, the heart of it, the map inside the territory. Today, she had gotten them terribly mixed up. And in that mix-up, she had found a new kind of sound. She had failed, completely and publicly. And in that failure, she had been more truly herself than she had ever been while trying to be perfect. She closed the piano lid softly. She didn't know if she would ever do something like that again. Probably not. Maestra Petrova would have her practicing scales twice as hard tomorrow. Dr. Reinhardt's words were a compliment, but they were also a weight. People would expect things now, but that was for tomorrow. Tonight, as she got ready for bed, the memory of those 3 seconds wasn't a memory of shame or fear. It was a memory of a flash of pure, clear knowing. It was her secret. A secret made of sound that had lasted only a moment, but that had changed everything. She had learned that sometimes, when you can't find your way through the forest, it's okay to climb the tallest tree and show everyone what the forest really looks like from the sky.